Mr. Constant has stepped out. So thank you all for joining us today on our final session in the series reviewing municipal investments in our community through the ARPA federal recovery funds. Over the past 2 years, we distributed $214 million to local businesses, nonprofits, and individuals that help prevent an economic crisis and deliver valuable services to people in need. We also used that funding to try new ways of doing business and learned a lot about how we can make local government, businesses, and organizations more nimble and efficient. As we prepare for the next round of federal relief funds this spring, we wanted to hear from different grant recipients and local businesses to learn how past funds were used and what their plans are for the future. Today, we're focusing on individual artists. The Assembly gave a $800,000 grant for an individual artist relief program to Cook Inlet Lending Center through ARPA, as well as $2 million for the Arts and Culture Organization Stabilization, administered by the Rasmussen Foundation through the CARES Act funds. So we'll hear from individual artists today, and we'll start with Graham Day and then proceed.
It's Dain, but I've been called many things in my life.
My apologies.
Dain.
Graham Dain, and I understand we have possibly a couple others on the phone. Are there any artists on the phone?
I don't know about artists on the phone, but this is Jeff Barrett from Rasmussen Foundation. I'm joining you.
You're an artist.
Thank you so much.
He plays guitar really well.
He plays guitar. Yeah.
And also,
hi there, this is Enzi Ferrari. I'm also with the Rasmussen Foundation and also an artist.
Hi, Enzina, how you doing?
great. Thank you so much for joining us. So we will turn to Mr. Dain.
All right, thank you. The arts community here is small and pretty interconnected. I mean, for instance, my studio's in the same building as Amyville's workspace, and Enzina is one of my colleagues at the university where I teach. I'm here representing myself and my other half, Linda Infante-Lyons. We were both in receipt of the grants. And when COVID hit, with most people, we lost business. We had a work trip planned to the North Slope through ConocoPhillips, which got turned down, and that was a contract that potentially could have led to other things, but that just died on the vine. Linda was unable to get people over to a student, so she actually had to turn down a couple of commissions. An art camp that we spent years setting up also tanked for a couple of years, but we'll be back up again this summer. And there were a couple of things that obviously dried up because of COVID. It's coming back. I teach at the university in the art department, and we had lowering numbers of students, which also affected teaching. And as an adjunct, I'm not tenured. If we don't have the numbers, if the students don't sign up, because again, they did not like working online, then that is also potentially income that's lost. As artists, we have to be very flexible when it comes to income. And when you're in a position where that flexibility is going to strain you to the point where you're bending over too far, it does create problems. But there were 2 rounds of the funding. Linda and I received funding in the second round, and you want to know how it helped us in a great way. We both are extremely fortunate that we have studio spaces. Linda's is in a space in Mountain View, which is actually owned by the Anchorage Community Land Trust. Mine is in Spanard at the Nave, which is owned by Cook Inlet Housing Authority. So they are our landlords. And the money that we received basically paid our leases for a year. It also helped pay for our business insurance. And of course, those 2 non-profits work heavily within the local community. So we're very happy that the money we received was plowed back into sort of greater efforts. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, without those studio spaces, Linda was given a mural project through CHAR. Again, if she hadn't had the studio space, if we hadn't been able to afford it, that opportunity would also have dried up. And that was for a mural over, again, the Nave. So I'm sure that many people here will say that most of the opportunities that we find in Anchorage, they can be few and far between, but they can disappear very quickly. And considering I mean, I used to be on the Municipal Arts Advisory Commission for a couple of years, and so I know some of the politics that goes on behind the scenes, but I also know the importance of art and artists to this community. We're very fortunate. A psychologist claimed that during COVID, we were some of the best prepared to deal with this sense of self-isolation because we're used to spending so much time by ourselves inside our own heads, that COVID didn't make that much of a difference to us. Well, obviously it did. But if you talk to Georgia Blue at the Georgia Blue Gallery, she said that there was one small upside of the pandemic, and that was people started buying art because they had more money, because they weren't traveling. And so that also went back into the community. And my other half and I, we try and buy local as much as we can. I'm a huge fan of keeping money within our community, of spending what we can within local businesses, because it helps us, but it also helps the city. And considering that one of the things we were constantly being told by the administration, as was, and some of the reading that we had to do for the MAAC, the arts here is considered extremely important for tourism, and partly based upon some of the arts, if you believe the statistics. People come up here expecting to see, an arts-rich environment. And so Ingvild sees one side of it. Linda and I and Rejoy, we see a different side of it. But ultimately, we're very grateful to the municipality because, as I say, that fund basically gave us a year's breathing space where we were not concerned about not covering our bills and losing our spaces. And for both of us, having that separate space to be able to do this, being able to bring clients in, it also gave us the opportunity to get access to the internet, the Zoom classes, Zoom calls, Zoom lectures, which we hadn't been doing before. So it gave us a little bit more of an impetus. But effectively, it gave us that breathing space to look for those additional opportunities and to cover the costs. You only have to lose $5,000 or $10,000 in this business, and it can make the difference. It's a substantial difference. And there's a great book which I'd recommend to anybody in the arts industry to read. It's by an author called William Dereshowitz, and it's called The Death of the Artist: How Artists and Creators Are Surviving at a Time During Big Business, Billionaires, and the Increasing Use of the Internet. And in it, he says that most artists live literally on a month-to-month basis. They work out how much money they need to survive this month to get through the next month. And he talked about 250, 300 creatives, and almost to a person, no matter what the fields were, that was how they addressed their finances. And so to have that year's grace period, that's one less worry or stress that you have to worry about, which means you have the time to look for other opportunities. And that's one of the things that I'm sure everybody here will say. You are constantly juggling, you're constantly looking and researching, both within and beyond the state's borders itself. So any money that comes our way that actually takes off some of that pressure is always a good thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you mind also saying, Mr. Dain, what's your preferred medium
Oh,
in which you work?
Linda is predominantly an oil painter. I'm I suppose, painter draftsman. So medium. If it's wet and it can be handled with a brush, I'll use it. So anything and everything, but we're both predominantly two-dimensional artists.
Got it. Thanks. I saw a couple hands. Mr. Constant?
No, I didn't. I'm sad that I missed the end and the beginning of the talk.
Wasn't that interesting, Chris?
Yeah, the end of the talk, I hope that we got to was a very concrete vision that I've been discussing with Ingo for a long time, and that's to create Anchorage as a music city, and at the same time designate 1 week of the year in which we host the world's music culture here.
Definitely.
And become the center of the music world in the spring on the shoulder of the year, kind of May. There are a number of template events, and it's an interesting area where I've had conversations with some folks on the other side of that door where there's alignment and there might be some opportunity. And so this investment that we're talking about, surveying music is very important, and its impacts on our community and how we spark a better and more robust climate for it here, because it is infused in all of our lives. So there's that. And then a little pontification, maybe. It's so great. We met on the side of a building in Mountain View. You were painting.
Yeah.
And Bruce, you and I met at Out North, and you and I met at the Toast Gallery, which is like
Years ago.
so long ago. And Angel, you were swinging the first time we ever met off of
Oh,
a
dear.
pulley at the Mobile Trailer Art Supply playing music and like an angel
I'm trying to
heaven.
be a serious politician.
So I'm glad
was
that you're
even-
here because I've known you all for so long and this investment was so important. And so I don't really have a question, but I just want to say that this investment was important for maintaining a whole level of our culture that makes investments, that lives, that creates and beautifies our community and inspires people. So that's the purpose for me of this talk and the end of the last talk. So if I have questions, I'll ask them.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Oh, can I say one more thing? Anchorage is a peculiar city in many ways. Some of the things we deal with are truly unique, but one of them is lack of affordable studio space. A lot of people work out of their houses or they'll work out of crappy garages. Bruce, Sheila's got her own studio space in Spinard, right? She's had it for years, and it's a compound. We have workspaces. I don't know, Rijo, if you have a studio space, but that idea of affordable studio space, if you want to attract and keep artists here, something like more affordable studio space, even municipal grants. When I was on the MAAC, we were looking into not just funding the annual nonprofits, because again, there are some 200 small arts nonprofits that do everything from children's music to theatre to barbershop quartets. I mean, it's remarkable just how much activity there is here. But the space available to do it is tiny. And it's because we don't have as much municipal support as other areas, because we are a smaller community, because there are fewer opportunities and fewer spaces. Potentially, we have a very high turnover of artists from all professions. And if the city wants to invest in that, fantastic, because one of the things, I have a weekly radio show on visual arts and visual culture, and it started off as basically talking to Alaskan artists, and then moved into talking to people, friends as far away as Sweden. And I'm hoping to get some Aussies on, who, again, they're all artists. We could be a hub, and if the music thing is beginning of that, fine. If the visual arts can piggyback on top of that, it's good for this community, and it also will bring people in. And it's not the case of just bring them in; it's keeping them. And if you want to put yourself on the map as arts friendly, then the city needs to stump up some money from somewhere. And it's not just a case of artists are extremely misunderstood. There are a lot of very bad, poor stereotypes, some of which we perpetuate, many of which are perpetuated by the media and by Hollywood straight entertainment. I mean, we all know that Van Gogh was crazy and chopped his ear off, right? There's a lot more to it than that, but I think that we could do a better job explaining to people what we do. But everybody seems to like going to museums. They like to buy art, they like to have it on their walls, and they like to potentially talk about it. Well, in which case that's great. But if you don't have artists working here, you're not going to have art to do that with.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Mr. Dain. And then we'll need to move on to Angel next, and then the others. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Just note that the thought, sound diplomacy, that the idea of this event is the core of it is music, because that brings crowds, but it is also a diplomatic event, which we bring cultures from the East, like Asia, all the way down the Pacific Rim. The whole Ring of Fire is one idea, and art and all of it. So the idea is not small, it's all-encompassing of the arts.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. And thank you again, Mr. Dain. I know you had mentioned you need to leave
In a few minutes' time.
minutes. So thank you for being here. Ms. Guten.
Yeah, that's good. I would like to just sort of stay on that idea that Christopher Constance mentioning, and then come sort of taper it off with a little testimony of myself and a couple of other fellow artists who also received individual grants. But since I primarily nowadays spend time in this organizational world and sort of building awareness around and exploring how artists can organize and partner in many spheres. I just want to also just say that I just came back from the Tree Fort Festival in Boise, and I went there completely exhausted and not really wanting to go, because I thought, okay, I know I'm going to meet the mayor of Boise and I'm going to meet the festival directors who I know. We already had them up here to talk at the Alaska Music Summit that we do annually, and we haven't done it during COVID. But I was like, yeah, I'm going now. I'm a music politician. I'm going to go down there, but I'm too tired. And I came back after 2.5 days completely rejuvenated from the whole experience. And whether it was walking around, and granted they had amazing weather, but whether it was listening to music that wasn't my kind of music, or listening to music that I had chosen, or meeting politicians and city folk that were kind of behind or have gotten behind this 10-year-old festival, or whether it was seeing the incredible spread of people that were congregating downtown. It kind of was a 24/7 festival for 5 days, this particular one, but just remembering that whole idea of the music is at the heart of it, but so is the food, so is the adult and child-friendly beverage, so is the art, so is the yoga, so is the crazy zany program of weird art, such as how to pick a lock, or so are the weird sculptures that sort of hang out in the whole sort of expression and a very broad range of identities expressed, even though Boise in itself is a very, very pale community. I think it's like around 98% Anglo-Saxons, but no, it was a very kind of life-affirming experience about how important a festival is. It has social impact, it has economic impact, all those different things. But from a signature event comes so much after. And on a very small scale, I'm also proud that the festival that I've been running and started 15 years ago also has kind of reverberation both in the art community and also in the local community. And Eric Gilbert, who runs that Tree Fort Festival, he just said in a panel, at the end of the panel, he said, look, it just has an incredible value to show people we can do it. We bring all these people together, we do this stuff, and people can have a good time. It's okay to enjoy oneself. It's really a big part of life to be a human, to get together with people and to do these different activities that we've put together. And just the sheer value of it cannot be underestimated. And so we feel that too, after 2.5 years of isolation, whether we were used to it, I was also pretty prepared, or whether we were actually undergoing some serious mental crisis, which many of my colleagues have suffered because they have just been isolated. We don't need to dwell on that. But I would just say personally, thank you so much for giving me, as an individual artist, an economic boost. It helps pay off credit card debt, in my case. Gear that I bought that you're going to hear the result of once I get a chance to play with other people again on a regular basis. I spoke with a couple of my colleagues today and said, I'm going to City Hall, and how did that money help you? And it was basically a very, very useful boost for their economy, because everyone experienced the same thing as I mentioned, a complete and instant, unprecedented lack of income from their art form. People are 100%, 60%, 30% depending on this money. They have families, they don't, they live in a hovel, or they are trying to pay off some of their bills with their music money. It doesn't matter. It was a tremendous hit for an unknown number of people. So that was a wonderful thing. I will just mention a side issue also. Spanage Arts Fest it raised money during the first year of COVID, and we gave 10 mini grants, a tenth of what the municipality could give to each artist, $500. And from that, we built 2 brand new programs that have already raised $50,000 for charitable organizations. Just the kind of initiative that one artist had, that he wanted to do a fundraiser, couldn't happen the way he wanted. It ended up being an online series instead, attracted a lot of individual donors and donations from organizations and so on. And we're in the second year of that. That's one example. And I could think of many others, but just these small sums that get put in there, as you already know. I just want to reiterate what you already know, that they really sprout off tremendous value, economic value, socioeconomic value, and social impact, and sometimes lasting programs and activities that enrich hundreds, if not thousands, of people's lives. So this is incredibly efficiently spent money. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have to head off, but could I just say one more thing before I go? Grants, even a grant such as this, it's a good size, but very often the receipt of grants, no matter how small, they lead to other grants. It becomes almost a self-fulfilling thing, because if you have an entity that has decided to give you money, that's often a red flag for many other grant-giving authorities that your work has value and that therefore it's worth funding.
Green flag.
Yes, green flag, sorry. Different cultures, Cameron. Right? And so hopefully, again, these grants that we've all received, at some point in the future, they will pay additional dividends beyond that $5,000, because again, people, it just seems to work that way. One thing leads on to another.
Thank you for raising that point and for participating today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
And thank you so much, Scott and you too. We also have Bruce Farnsworth and Rajoy Memento here, and a couple other folks on the line. So if one of you would like to go ahead and maybe talk about your preferred medium, any recent project, impact of the pandemic, and how you used your grant.
Hey, Claire, this is Jeff at Rasmussen Foundation, and I have to jump to another meeting here shortly. Is it okay if I just talk a little bit about the Municipal Arts and Culture Matching Program
Sure.
first?
So
This is Suzanne. Go
real
ahead,
quick,
Chris.
Jeff, thank you for being here. And just, this is perfect segue, because what Graham had just said was that sometimes when an artist is recognized by a grantor, others will come and participate and support those artists. And so what I was gonna say, I didn't know you were on the phone, was that just like our program, we funded this project and Rasmussen matched a portion of what we were able to bring forward, which, so there's a real world concrete, in this case, example of exactly what Graham was just talking about. Take it away, Jeff. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Jeff Barrett. I'm Chief of Staff at Rasmussen Foundation, and I think it's safe to say I'm the least interesting and talented person on this panel. I just appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit on the arts today. And when Claire did call me and to talk about the Muni Matching Arts Program and the impetus on why we created it, I just kept coming back to a story. I was just home recently. I was visiting my folks in Illinois. I was driving to the doctor's office, and there was passing just street after street of basically just strip mall after strip mall. I got to the doctor's office, and the doctor says, "Jeff, how can you live in Alaska? It's dark and it's cold." And I just shot back, how could you live here? And what I was getting at is, it just felt like there was no heart and soul. And I think the impetus behind the Municipal Arts Program is that arts and culture is the heart and soul of our community. It brings vibrancy to our town, and Rasmussen Foundation wanted to provide some intentionality for communities to invest in arts and make sure there was time and space to talk about that. And so this grant program, we provided up to, it was a $500,000 investment, and we provided $50,000, up to $50,000 per community that we would match to nonprofits that were arts-focused nonprofits. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible for communities and cities and municipalities to invest in the arts. So all they had to do was basically provide us a list of organizations, as long as they were a nonprofit and had COVID-related law, so we would match it, no questions asked. And we, of course, expended the $500,000. It was matched. And the other piece of this is it had to be matched basically dollar for dollar. So our investment of $500,000, of course, was matched by that. In total, 13 communities across the state participated in the program, and it resulted in just focused conversation in the arts. And of course, Anchorage is one of the communities that did take advantage of that. But so that's high level of one part of the arts-related focus that Rasmussen Foundation had during COVID. We also had a program that focused on grants to individual artists as well, but we wanted to cover both the individuals and investments in arts organizations that, of course, were having to shut their doors. There was certainly a discussion, and rightfully so, of the human aspect of COVID, people losing jobs, people needing really core social services. But again, we wanted to have that spotlight both on our arts and culture sector, because we knew if some of these organizations closed, they might not open back up, and that directly reflects on, again, the vibrancy of our community, the heart and soul of our community, and we didn't want that to happen. So, and I know one of our core leaders and thought leaders on arts and culture in Rasmussen Foundation is Gina. And Gina, if you have anything else you'd like to add about our arts investment, please chime in.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jeff. I just want to echo the importance of investing in the arts and how we saw that as not just an investment in individuals, but an investment in the community as a whole. And I just want to share in this brief time that I have just some general statistics that we know about what investing in arts and culture on an organizational, community, individual level leads to. In a typical year, we have data from 2017, the arts and culture sector that's comprised of individual artists, creative workers, and arts and culture-based organizations contribute $1.35 billion into Alaska's economy. And that's a fraction that's more than several others throughout the state. And so we know that when we invest in artists and when we invest in the arts and culture sector, it benefits Alaska as a whole. And then we also do have some statistics and some data on how artists were impacted directly and how artists and culture organizations were impacted. We've heard today from some of the individual situations and anecdotes that people experience, but we know as a whole that our arts and culture sector was hit hard. We have data that shows that 40% of jobs were lost in the arts and culture sector, and some of these organizations virtually had to stop all programming. We also saw anticipated losses in revenue to arts and culture organizations exceeding almost $3 million in the first year of the pandemic. And so we can think about how that can grow exponentially over the last couple of years. The last note that I'll just share is kind of staggering. And this is a statistic from the Americans for the Arts that surveyed this field in 2020, because we really wanted to get some hard data on how this is actually impacting artists. And what they reported is that 95% of artists and cultural workers reported losing their income and no longer have any savings to make up that difference. But despite that, nearly 80% of artists were still committed to using their creativity and their expertise to raise morale and create community connections during COVID. And more than half did so without payment. And we know that healthy communities are those that have a healthy and vibrant art and culture sector that funds these different areas that Jeff mentioned, individual artists and arts and culture organizations.
Thank you so much for that information. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thank you to both of you. This is kind of off topic. We're kind of running out of time, so I'll keep it very brief. On the meeting of April 12th, this has not been kind of shared broadly, but we're going to be reading a resolution for Ed Rasmussen. So I wanted to make sure that somebody there knew and was interested in coming down and receiving that. And probably we'll do a separate one down the road for Dain. But so April 12th, 6 p.m., Assembly Chambers, we will be reading a resolution in honor of Ed.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for the information. Appreciate your participation today. And we'll go ahead and go to the two other folks here in the room. And then if members have questions for anybody at any point.
Good choice.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Regina Memento. I am a freelance illustrator here, and I specialize in murals. I also do a little bit of graphic design, but my work primarily focuses on illustration. And so my work, I love fusing art and community together, and using art as a way to have it be very accessible to the community. I work with primarily a lot of local businesses. During the pandemic, I remember having people reach out to me because they wanted to, their business was, a little bit slow, and they had, a little bit of funding for revamping of their space, or, maybe they had a new space and they wanted it to reflect their stories and reflect, their vision for their business. And so I really love what I do because I get to just kind of travel around the city and meet different people who, they have different visions for their spaces. And it's hard for me to create work just on my own. There's just something about having my ideas and someone else's ideas and having it just sort of work together and having it available to everyone. And that's why I love public art. I mean, you think about all the spaces you've gone to when you travel, or even spaces where you feel so relaxed or something inspiring about it. It's transformative. And so I find this type of work very, very healing and connecting. And I would also like to echo what Dain said, and Gina, Jeff. It is boosting morale. What we do, especially during the pandemic. I mean, I remember there was a moment where I was like, I'm an artist, so you kind of go back and forth, feeling empowered, and then sometimes you're just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And so getting this grant was kind of like a reminder, it's like, what, the work that you do, the work that we do is important. During the pandemic, who do we turn to? The arts, music, books, movies. How many movies did we watch? How many books did we read? And so, so I just think this is just, it's so important to, to invest in artists, because yeah, it does create a ripple effect. Yeah, one of my favorite things about my work is I was working on this mural at the Westchester Creek area, a little tunnel there on C Street. And I got to see the people that like walk by every day, running or whatever, or biking. And you get to see the regulars, you know, day in and day out. And I soon got to know their names and everything, and like, you know, some of them would open up to me, tell me about like, I don't know, just little snippets, little slices of life, you know. And it was just like this wonderful feeling of just like, you know, here you are doing your thing in life, you know, here I am doing my thing, and yet we're like coming together and we're connecting, and I get to share a piece of me, a little bit of my art, a little bit of, you know, maybe some experiences, something that we can find connection with, and I get to hear a little bit about them. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling, but I don't really know what else to say about it. But I think I find that really beautiful. And so, and I really love your idea also about the future of Anchorage being a music hub. I see that, but then I also see art being pretty central too. Something that I want to just kind of put in there, real festival with art, you know, public art, working alongside with musicians. I think that would be really, really sick. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Just a simple question I have for you is you talk about connection and work with other artists. How does that infuse your art? How does it actually get into the work? The connection that you make, the way you kind of come in contact with people.
I think my work is very much a storytelling thing. You know, I love hearing stories and finding like maybe symbolism behind it, patterns that I see. Like for the recent piece I did for the Seed Lab, I interviewed a lady who runs a Mochileros food truck, and you know, coming from Guatemala, she told me some of her favorite flowers and like some, you know, just some of those things that came from her upbringing. And so I bring that to like in her mural. I wanted to put that in there. So just little things like that. Sometimes colors. Sometimes I'll think of colors that convey that emotion, or I don't know. Or sometimes it's like, sometimes it's not just the details, but sometimes it's like, what are they really saying? Like, what can I mirror for them? I think that's what I like to do, just seeing like, okay, your story is about growth, or like your story is about this. And so that's what, I guess that's the fusion part. And then I try to find stuff that like looks good with it too, you know,
Thank
like,
you.
make it look good.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here and talking with us today. We'll go ahead and move on to Mr. Farnsworth.
Hi, my name is Bruce Farnsworth. Thanks for the opportunity to come and share my experience. And I'll try to be really specific about how that particular grant program that you all launched in response to the economic impacts of the COVID pandemic affected me personally. But first, just a quick orientation on my situation. I'm the owner operator of a small business, and I've never actually applied for an individual artist grant award. I've been working in the arts for 20 plus years, but that's just one thing that I have avoided doing, and for two reasons. One, because I really didn't find myself in the same kind of need for individual artist grant opportunities, of which there are very few, just so you know. If you didn't already know that, be aware. Organizations and nonprofit entities have a far broader array of grant opportunities that they can seek, but individual artists are restricted to a very, very small pool of grant opportunities. So one reason was that I just didn't feel like I was in the same kind of need in order to continue to live here and to practice my art and discipline. And the other is I just didn't want to compete with those artists. And I also had a lot of involved relationships with different funding organizations that were often strategic. And I just didn't want to muddy the waters by also becoming an individual. I mean, I was involved with grant projects that were seeking funds. And I just didn't want to create that sense of awkwardness of asking for myself, because I don't really ever make money on the art projects that I seek funding for. I'm the founder of a couple of different art groups that are based here in Anchorage. One is called the Light Brigade, and I'm going to throw in a quick pitch while we're talking about reasons that people would be really excited to come to Alaska to experience arts and culture activities. You talked about music and on the shoulders. I think that really brilliant, makes a lot of sense. But one of the natural attributes that we have here that we haven't, I don't think, taken as full advantage of as we could, and that is the intense amount of darkness that we have in the winter, which makes us actually a really fantastic and I think unique setting to host some kind of winter time-based or light-based art festival as well. So I just want to throw that in because I know that we're always looking for ways to encourage more participation in arts and cultural events by our own population in the winter, but also trying to create new reasons for people to come to Anchorage as a destination. And I think that there's huge potential in that, and would be happy to talk more about it at some point. But one of the other art group that I helped found is called Track and Field, and we launched an international artist project called the 8 Boxes Project, and we were working with artists, teams of artists in each of the 8 Arctic nations, and we had been for a couple of years. And one of the things that happened when the pandemic hit is that all international travel, as you know, ceased, and our project was highly dependent on our ability to go and participate in Arctic conferences. And we had presented at Arctic conferences about our project on 3 occasions, and we were just getting ready to, we'd been invited to participate and present at a 4th Arctic Pan-Arctic conference in Reykjavik in October of that year that the pandemic began. And we knew that we were going to be able to raise some operating funds through some grants for the project and be able to do the 2 things that we wanted to do, which was to go to this conference, meet new people around the Arctic, meet artists, raise awareness about the project, but also we had used these opportunities to bring the artists from the other Arctic nations that we were working with to have summits of our partners at these conferences. And then that was a really important part of that. Well, we'd gotten out of sync with our funding and the timing of our plans a little bit, to the point where I had to loan the project money in order to get Russian and Finnish artists to join us in Iceland for this summit that we were planning to front in time for them to be able to, make travel arrangements and so on and so on. I wasn't worried about it. But then when the pandemic came, it was clear that I might find myself in trouble down the road. And so when I heard about the opportunity, there were 2 reasons that I ended up applying. One was because I didn't know how I was going to make up the deficit that in my own personal finances that you might say was just an irresponsible mistake on my part to loan my project money, which I've thought about myself. But in any event, the fact of the matter is it was going to be a big problem, and I could see it looming ahead. And the other reason that I applied, and I broke my rule and my uninterrupted refusal to apply for individual artist grants, because I also found out that in the event that there were more than 100 applicants for this particular fund, it was going to be thrown into a lottery situation. And I thought that was okay, and it suited my preference for not competing against other artists because I would lower their odds of winning if I entered by a really, really infinitesimal amount. So I jumped in and I was one of the lucky recipients on the first round of one of those art grants, and it helped me tremendously because it solved a problem that I just absolutely had no idea how I was going to solve. And it allowed our project to continue to move forward.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, and I just want to see if members have any questions.
Very quickly. So wait, is the Light Brigade not a reference to the Crimean War then?
Oh, no, Light Brigade still, and we did a small piece for the Christmas tree lighting ceremony downtown.
So it's not
experimented and.
It's not the Charge of the Light Brigade by Tennyson.
Oh, for heaven's sake, no, the opposite.
Okay.
And I would add, I think that you're underestimating your years in the art community in Anchorage. I don't think it's 20 plus. I think it's getting closer to 30. Maybe. So I would add just a note that you hosted an event. Many of you may remember there was an ice festival that happened here some years ago. Like they literally put I think it was a Cadillac inside of a frozen, amazing thing you could walk around on. And that was, for me personally, the moment that climate change became real. That weekend, it was like 30 below, 20 below, and this ice and art was perfect. And they have these heads mounted on these poles. They're faces of people that have been made out of ice mounted on these poles. And then out of nowhere, this hot 40-degree wind came up, and it was like a 60-degree swing in a day. And I watched those heads slide down those poles, like a scene from a medieval movie. And it was like
Vlad the Impaler.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And at that
We almost
moment,
renamed the project.
it became clear to me that we have a problem, Houston. And this was many, many years ago, but the point of this session was to say thank you to you for supporting the artists in this community, because oftentimes they are left behind. As you have heard a theme, very few opportunities. And my gratitude for us to be able to do that. And in fact, in 2 tranches, so every applicant received money, the lottery in the end.
How much did we end up putting towards it?
I think it was about $1 million, just a little bit over maybe, or just a little bit under. It was about $1 million. It was 500 the first go round, and then there were another 300 or so artists who there wasn't enough money for the second time. And so these direct investments are the way to get money right into the economy, like one step away, not all of the attenuated steps through accountants and bookkeepers. And
I think that's key.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you for your role in organizing this conversation, and also with Claire Ross. And thanks to everyone who participated. Thank you for taking time to be here today and your contributions to our community as well. And thank you, Jeff and Zina, if you're still on the line. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Have a great weekend, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So, I was going to hand it to you, but you weren't here when we started.
Just have.
Oh, camera.